House of the Dragon actor responds to racist reactions from Game of Thrones fans. And the reason I want to respond to his response is that he says that the actor responded to the reactions saying that he finds it rather ridiculous that a rich black guy in Westeros is more unbelievable than flying dragons. And this is the same Peter Dinklage argument when people were upset about the original ending of Game of Thrones. And Peter Dinklage said, well, it's a show about flying dragons. Why do you care? So you have these actors that are making millions of dollars off of our time and money, while at the same time ridiculing our hobbies. I mean, I can just flip it around and ask Peter Dinklage, well, it's a show about dragons. Why do you care about investing yourself into acting? I mean, no one cares. It's just flying dragons. And then you can also imagine how it would be if the build-up from Game of Thrones with the Night King ended with Arya just walking up to the Night King and kicking him in the balls. And all of a sudden, the Night King is defeated. I mean, it's a show about dragons. Why can't Arya do that? Why is that difficult to imagine? That Arya could just walk past all the White Walkers and just kick the Night King in the balls, and all of a sudden, the story has a satisfying conclusion. You can also wonder, at the Battle of the Bastards, why couldn't Sansa Stark just walk up to Ramsay by herself and slap him on the cheek? And Ramsay would have been bewildered, and Sansa would be like, shame on you, Ramsay! You are a vile, misogynist pig! And Ramsay would have been, you know what? You're absolutely correct. I will reflect on what I have done, and I will try to do better. And he would pull all of his armies back to the Bolton Castle. Because it's a show about dragons. Anything can happen, right? Like, fuck immersion. Fuck storytelling. Fuck everything. So let's actually address the question that Steve Toussaint asked about racismus. First of all, I find it very interesting how all the other shows having black characters are devoid of the racists. Like, no one complains about Blade. No one complains about Storm from X-Men. So it's almost like the progressive culture in America have trained people to understand that blackwashing is wrong. Like, replacing a black character with a white one is horrible, right? So after training people to think this way, everyone is poker face when you woke wash characters. So why is that? Well, let's see who demands the woke washing. Like, when you have this lady, Elena Jones, from The Guardian, right, taking a show that's popular, it's making money, it's financially successful, it's getting everything, and she's saying that there are no black people on Game of Thrones. First of all, that's completely false. There were black actors. It's just that it made sense from within the geographical position of Westeros. It's called immersion, by the way. Like, it's making sense. But let's assume that there were. Let's assume that in the entire Game of Thrones, like, there weren't any black people. R.R. Martin is a white person writing a story about white people. Give me the arguments why that is bad. Like, please explain to me how that is problematic. Like, under what ideology, under what rules, under what guidelines would this be a problem? I wouldn't complain if a black person would write a story about black people. That's perfectly fine. In fact, when I grew up with Chinese movies. A Chinese man written a Chinese story about people from China, and it was great. You know, like, a lot of the kung fu stuff that I grew up with was representing that. Was it wrong? Was it evil? Was it racist? Should I be condemning the Chinese directors from doing that? No, you know, like, people in Bollywood do that as well. Like, they write Hindi stories with Hindi actors. Like, I don't see a problem. If the story can include other people in a successful manner, fine. Like, no one is complaining about Stargate starring black characters. That's fine, you know, like, but when you have a story where the only reason that they're doing this is because the journalists demand it, it upsets people. Because they feel that you care more about the journalists than you care about everyone else. As if the journalist is in a position of authority just because he works at a multi-billion-dollar corporation and his grievances are far more important than that of the fans. Like, when the fans say, hey, can we get a better ending for Game of Thrones? the fans are mocked and belittled. When the journalists say, "Oh, can we get less boobies in Game of Thrones?" Everyone's like, "Oh, well, we're upsetting the journalists if we show more titties. Like, we need to censor ourselves. We need to be good little corporate drones because we might upset the person at the Guardian." That's one of the reasons why people are... I don't think that people are racist, to be honest, especially when you look at Star Wars and you see Mace Windu as one of the most beloved characters and one of the most beloved Jedis. Like, where is the backlash against that? There's nowhere to be found. The only time you find backlash is when you do this lazy storytelling. There are black people in Westeros. Can we not tell their stories? I mean, it would be really interesting to see a prequel for the cities of Meereen and to experience other cultures and other places in Game of Thrones besides Westeros. Like, that would have been interesting. You know, and this is something that I really dislike about American culture. Why don't you make a fantasy setting in Africa? What's stopping you? Like, that would actually sell. I would love to see a fantasy setting with African folklore. But for some goddamn reason, they just don't want to do it. Like, they would rather just do the same shit, like a prequel, a sequel of something that already exists, and then woke wash out characters. And call it a day. And everyone that complains, "Oh, it's because you're racist." Imagine if they were to make a story about Shaka Zulu, and there's some white people there. And no one questions this. Like, no one is like, why are they there? They're like, "Oh, they've always been there." You know, like, it's immersion breaking. It really breaks immersion when you do that. And again, like, I'm really upset that we don't get to experience some different stories from African folklore. Like, have you read African folklore? It's really fucking cool. It's really not. You can have a Conan the Barbarian setting taking place in Africa with full black cast. Like, you don't even need to cast a single white person there. It would be an amazing story. It would be really great. They're not wanting to do that. Like, they're not interested. They don't want to talk about the god of Nancy. They don't. No. Fascinating, isn't it? So, this is what they do. They do this lazy casting. And again, like, I don't think that Game of Thrones has that many people upset about this choice of casting. I mean, it's just like a little bit immersion breaking, because you're like, well, they had to do this because otherwise it wouldn't have passed the censors, right? Like, otherwise the corporation wouldn't have greenlit the project unless they did this. And you have to wonder, like, why do we need censors in the West? Didn't we used to mock people in the Soviet Union for having censors when it came to literature and art and movies? Don't we make fun of the Chinese for having censors when they make their own movies? Why do we need to have censors? What happened when you just put on a work and it stood on its own? And if it was good, then people watched it. If it was bad, then no one watched it. And again, you know, great actor. I don't mind. Like, he plays a really good role. But it would have been nicer if he played something that makes sense within the context of the story. Like maybe a sword master from Bravos or something like that. So that doesn't break immersion. But okay, I understand. Like, the censors wouldn't have allowed it. You know, the only character that's never going to be whitewashed at this point is probably Tarzan. Like, Disney is not going to cast a black person as Tarzan. Let's be honest. You know it's coming. Like, the live adaptation from it's coming. And you can be goddamn sure that the main character is gonna be white. I'm willing to put money on that. And by the way, I really hate talking about these topics, right? Like, I hate talking about race in movies and stuff, but it's literally the only thing that the media talks about now. Like, they can't enjoy a movie without talking about it. So here we go. You know, we have to have the conversation. Again, why are people not upset about Mace Windu? Doesn't make any sense, right? If you genuinely believe that the only reason people are complaining is because they're bigots. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.